Have you ever noticed how some of the gentlest souls you meet carry a quiet kind of fatigue in their eyes? They're the ones who always show up, who always listen, who always say, "Don't worry, I've got it." They radiate warmth. They make space for others. They smile even when their hearts are heavy. But if you pause long enough to really see them, not their gestures, not their grace, but the stillness between their breaths, you might sense it. That faint ache beneath the kindness. That invisible weight that's been there for years. Something deeper, something heavier, something quietly breaking behind all that light. We like to think of kindness as something pure, simple, untouched by complication. We teach it to children like a universal truth. We praise it in leaders. We measure our worth by how much compassion we can give. But kindness, like everything human, carries a shadow. And when we refuse to see that shadow, when we pretend it doesn't exist, kindness begins to bend. It turns from something healing into something that quietly harms. It starts quietly. A child learns that kindness brings safety, that being agreeable earns them love. When they shrink their needs to make room for others, they are met with smiles, approval, maybe even the affection they were starving for. And slowly, the pattern takes root. Their nervous system learns the equation: kindness equals connection, compliance equals survival. By the time they're grown, it's no longer a choice, it's instinct. They don't just act kind, they are kindness. And somewhere along the way, they forget who they were before they had to earn love. They grow into the dependable one, the steady friend, the person who never asks for much, who listens more than they speak, who carries everyone's weight but their own. But here's the quiet truth: when kindness is fueled by fear of being unloved, unwanted, or forgotten, it stops being kindness. It becomes performance. It becomes a mask. And the longer that mask is worn, the harder it becomes to breathe beneath it. Because even goodness, when used as armor, can start to suffocate the soul it was meant to protect. Think about the endlessly kind ones in your life, the ones who always answer the call, who'll sit with you through your heartbreak, help you move at midnight, lend what they can't afford to give. Their generosity seems boundless. It looks noble. It feels holy. But if you've ever been that person, if you've played the role of the one who never stops giving, then you already know the truth hidden beneath it. Behind every act of self-sacrifice, there's a quiet resentment, a small voice whispering, "But what about me?" Most never let it speak, because chronic kindness has rules silent, invisible, and deeply ingrained. Rule number 1, you don't get to come first. To be kind means to give, not to ask. To carry, not to rest. To be needed, even when you're breaking. And so, that whisper gets buried, drowned beneath smiles and small talk, waiting for a moment of permission that never seems to come. Psychologists have a name for this quiet collapse: compassion fatigue. It's what happens when your heart gives more than it can hold, when empathy turns into exhaustion and care becomes depletion. You see it in nurses who stop feeling, in teachers who lose their spark, in parents who love deeply but can't remember the last time they felt joy without guilt. But it's not limited to those roles. Anyone with a tender heart, anyone who's built their worth around helping, is at risk, because even kindness has a threshold, and when you keep crossing it, something inside you starts to fade. Research has found something quietly tragic: people who constantly put others before themselves carry heavier loads of anxiety, depression, and even physical exhaustion. Because when care becomes constant, it stops being care. It becomes self-erasure. This is the hidden cost of being endlessly kind. When kindness isn't guided by boundaries, it mutates into something painful, a gentle form of self-destruction disguised as goodness. It's like tending to every flower in the garden while letting your own roots dry out. And when the gardener finally collapses, the whole garden begins to fade with them. But here's the part no one likes to admit. Sometimes kindness becomes its own kind of weapon. Not the sharp, manipulative kind, but the quiet, unintentional one. When you've been kind for so long, the world starts to script you that way. People come to depend on your softness. They lean into it, shape their comfort around it. And without realizing it, your kindness begins to teach others a dangerous lesson: that your needs can wait, that your boundaries bend, that your yes is always guaranteed. Soon, they stop asking what you want. Not out of cruelty, but because they've learned you'll always adapt. You'll always make room, even if it costs you the little space you had left for yourself. The kind person, without meaning to, teaches the world to look past them. It's a cruel irony. The gentler your heart, the quieter your presence becomes. And the quieter you become, the easier it is for others to forget you're there at all. This is the paradox of goodness. The kinder you are, the more invisible you feel. And invisibility is not peace. It's loneliness wrapped in grace, emptiness disguised as harmony. But let's be clear, kindness itself isn't the enemy. True kindness is sacred. It can soften the hardest hearts, bridge impossible distances, and remind us that love still exists in this fractured world. The danger lies in the source. There's kindness that flows from fullness and kindness that leaks from an old wound. One nourishes, the other drains. One is rooted in love, the other in fear of losing it. Let's turn to what the research tells us. In a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, scientists discovered a striking pattern: those who struggle to say no, those who pride themselves on being endlessly kind and accommodating, are far more prone to emotional exhaustion and burnout. It's not that kindness itself is the problem. It's that constant self-abandonment masquerading as kindness slowly empties the mind and body of energy. Another study from the University of California, Berkeley, found something equally profound. Altruism boosts well-being only when it comes from choice, when it's genuine, not guilt-driven. But when kindness is performed from fear of rejection, fear of being seen as selfish, fear of losing love, the effects reverse. Happiness declines, stress rises, and the very thing that once connected you to others starts quietly disconnecting you from yourself. And yet, so many of us stay caught in this loop. We keep saying yes because we're terrified of letting anyone down. We keep giving because we don't want to be seen as selfish. We keep sacrificing because somewhere deep inside, we've tied love to suffering. But the price of this quiet devotion is steep. Piece by piece, you start to disappear. You forget what you like, what you need, what you dream about. You become an echo of everyone else's expectations, a mirror for their comfort, not your truth. And one day, you wake up realizing you've spent so long caring for others that you no longer know how to care for yourself. You've become a stranger in your own life, a kind ghost, endlessly giving but rarely being. And this is where the shadow begins to stir. Because when you silence your own needs, when you swallow your anger, when you keep breaking your own boundaries in the name of being kind, those emotions don't vanish. They wait. They gather in the dark corners of your mind, thickening, fermenting, turning heavy, and one day, they find a way out. Maybe it's a sharp tone towards someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe it's sarcasm that cuts deeper than you intended. Maybe it's a quiet resentment that leaks through every smile. Or maybe it's something far louder, a full eruption after years of holding it all in, leaving you standing in the wreckage, wondering when the gentle person you used to be became a storm you can't recognize. We like to believe that kindness shields us from darkness, that goodness alone can keep the shadows away. But the truth is, kindness without honesty doesn't dissolve darkness. It feeds it. Because every time you say yes, when your heart quietly pleads no, every time you force a smile to hide the ache beneath it, every time you shrink your truth to protect someone else's comfort, that isn't compassion. That's self-abandonment dressed as virtue. And self-abandonment always leaves a scar. It might not show at first, but deep within, something fractures, a small betrayal repeated so often that it starts to feel like love. Let's be honest. Why do we do this? Why is it so hard for kind people to draw a line, to say no, to choose themselves? The answer runs deeper than we think. From the time we're small, we're taught that kindness equals goodness, that being agreeable makes us lovable, that harmony is safer than honesty, that love must be earned through giving. And for children who grow up in homes where love feels conditional, where affection depends on obedience, performance, or sacrifice, this lesson becomes law. They learn that peace comes at the cost of authenticity, that love has terms and fine print, that to be accepted, you must first disappear a little. So they grow up kind beautifully, heartbreakingly kind, but often at war with themselves. They mistake people-pleasing for compassion, and self-erasure for love. True kindness doesn't erase you. It includes you. If your generosity is draining your joy, if your empathy is costing your peace, if your care for others keeps coming at the expense of your own well-being, That isn't kindness anymore. That's self-neglect disguised as goodness. Neuroscience offers an illuminating truth. Inside your brain lives the mirror neuron system, a network that allows you to feel what others feel. It's what makes empathy possible. When you witness someone in pain, your own brain lights up as if you were hurting too. It's a beautiful design connection written into our biology, but there's a flaw in the wiring. Your mirror neurons can't tell the difference between healthy empathy and self-destructive empathy. So when you absorb everyone's suffering without boundaries, your nervous system floods with stress signals. Over time, that emotional overload becomes physical, chronic tension, fatigue, even illness. Your body starts to carry what your boundaries could have contained. In truth, the human brain was never designed for endless giving. It's not wired for constant, boundaryless compassion. It's wired for balance, for mutuality, for connection that flows both ways. So the dark side of kindness isn't that kindness itself is flawed. It's that our fear, our upbringing, our culture, and the wounds we never healed can twist something sacred into something suffocating. When kindness becomes a performance, when it's rooted in guilt instead of love, it starts to decay from the inside out. And in that slow unraveling, the very thing you once believed was your greatest strength can quietly become the force that breaks you. If you've ever felt it, the fatigue that sits beneath your smile, the quiet resentment that whispers in your chest, the ache of being seen as kind, but never known you are not alone. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're simply living out the side effects of a world that never taught us how to give without disappearing. This isn't the monster within you. It's the truth you buried, finally asking to be acknowledged. Because what we repress doesn't die, it waits for us to listen. And so the real question becomes this: how do we keep our hearts open without letting them bleed dry? How do we stay compassionate without turning into caretakers of everyone else's comfort? How do we love others deeply without abandoning ourselves in the process? The answer, as uncomfortable as it may be, is simple. Kindness must begin with you, not in the selfish sense the world warns you about, but in the sacred sense of remembering that you, too, are someone worth caring for. Because if your kindness doesn't include yourself, it stops being kindness. It becomes performance. And performances, no matter how graceful, eventually collapse under their own weight. True kindness breathes. It has boundaries. It says, I can give, but not at the cost of my soul. Think of it this way on every airplane. The instructions are the same. In an emergency, secure your own oxygen mask before helping anyone else. At first, that sounds wrong. Instinct says, help them first. But logic and survival say otherwise. Because if you can't breathe, you can't save anyone. Kindness works the same way. When you abandon your own needs, when you neglect your rest, when you silence your pain in the name of compassion, your care begins to suffocate. That's where boundaries come in. And for those who've built their identity on kindness, boundaries can feel terrifying, like rejection, like selfishness. But here's the truth. Boundaries are the highest form of honesty. A boundary says, this is what I can give, and this is what I cannot. It says, my love is real, but it cannot survive on empty. It says, I care enough to protect this connection from resentment. Because love without limits is not love, it's leakage. And even the purest compassion needs air to breathe. Psychologists describe boundaries as the invisible lines that separate where you end and another person begins. Without those lines, relationships blur into dependence, manipulation, or quiet suffering. But with them, connection becomes clearer, anchored in mutual respect, rather than silent obligation. Research even supports this truth. People who practice healthy boundaries report deeper, more fulfilling relationships, not because they give less, but because what they give is real. Their kindness isn't a reflex, it's a conscious choice. And that's what makes it powerful. When someone respects their own limits, their yes carries meaning. Their empathy feels grounded, not draining. Their presence feels safe, not performative, because authenticity is magnetic. It draws people in not through effort, but through truth. Setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to others. It's about finally saying yes to yourself. And that can feel foreign, even frightening, when your entire sense of worth has been built on how much you can give away. You might lose people along the way. Some will resist your change. Some will call you selfish for doing what they always took for granted. But that's okay, because love that depends on your exhaustion was never love. It was dependency wearing a friendly mask. There's even a name for this in psychology: pathological altruism. When the impulse to help starts to harm, it happens when caring turns into self-sacrifice, when rescuing becomes control, when compassion feeds dependency instead of growth. It looks like kindness on the surface, but underneath, it breeds guilt, fatigue, and the quiet decay of both people involved. It's not evil. It's just kindness that's lost its balance. In so many cultures, kindness is treated like the highest virtue, but often in ways that quietly demand our disappearance. We grow up hearing it in small, innocent phrases. She's such a good girl, she never causes trouble. He's such a nice guy, he's always there for everyone. They sound like praise, but underneath, there's a quiet expectation. Goodness means silence. Goodness means obedience. Goodness means never being the one who says no. But real goodness doesn't ask you to vanish. It asks you to show up fully, honestly, messily, and still choose compassion. Because when kindness is born from authenticity, it frees you. When it's driven by fear, it chains you to everyone else's comfort. For so many people, kindness becomes a lifelong disguise. A practiced smile to hide exhaustion, a gentle yes to avoid conflict, a way of surviving in a world that confuses peace with silence. But masks are heavy, and the longer you wear them, the harder it becomes to remember what your real face looks like. The goal isn't to abandon kindness, it's to remove the mask and let kindness flow from the real, unedited you. If you want to know who you truly are, look at how you treat yourself when no one else is watching. That's where genuine kindness begins, not in earning approval, but in the quiet, sacred choices that protect your own well-being. Because the real monster within kind people isn't their anger, isn't their limits, isn't their boundaries, it's self-neglect. And once you face it, once you set the mask down, your kindness doesn't fade. It deepens, it strengthens, it starts to breathe again. It becomes the kind of kindness that doesn't just keep others alive, it keeps you alive too. And maybe that's the truest form of compassion. To live fully as yourself, to give without disappearing, to love without losing your truth. Because the world doesn't need more people who say yes to everything. It needs people brave enough to say yes to themselves.